Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. This is my second live today. Earlier today was speaking with Zol Al-Habibi about the situation in Iran and the Iranian diaspora resistance movement and what things are like on the ground and what they're doing to try to overthrow the regime. If you missed that live, if you're on YouTube, Twitch, places like that, it's posted. It's the most recent video. I highly, highly encourage you to go take a look. It's very exciting. So that was earlier, and then I had another recording with the delightful John Graham. We talked about business, we talked about negotiation, his books, his fiction, war, politics. We ended on a very intense conversation about globalization. Um, so yeah, just a lot of stuff today. So I'm a little tired, a little wired, and there's so much. There's just so much. We're not even starting with Iran. That's the end. We're starting with a bunch of other things, including the situation in Cuba, everything else. I want to remind everyone that if you want the Cameron Journal delivered into your inbox, there's an easy way to do that. You head over to cameronjournal.substack.com or cameronjournal.com/newsletter and sign up for the Saturday newsletter. The cool thing about the Saturday newsletter is that you get the Cameron Journal delivered right to your inbox, all the interviews for the week, the news hour, the living joke, suggested articles, and my rolling weekly commentary on the news stories I think you should care about. This past week, it was a lot of Iran and AI, but that's also where I tend to do my deeper dives. A couple weeks ago, I did Georgia election, the evidence around issues with the Georgia election in 2020. So if you're looking for that type of content, cameronjournal.com/newsletter is the place to do that. That's also where I do cameronjournal.com is where I do a lot of my long form writing and things like that, and all the videos get posted and all that sort of thing. So it's a good place to be aware of. It's my home on the internet. So you can follow me on social media at Cameron Cowan on all your favorite platforms, except TikTok, which is at Cameron Journal. And I have threads on issues I'm talking about, news stories that I'm coming out with. I'm posting articles from friends, things that I like. So if you want that end of things, social media is your best bet. So, with all that having been said, let's dive into the headlines, and we're going to start right off the bat. We don't need that. That's from the end of the Living Joke last week. We're going to start right off the bat. What are we even starting with? We are starting. We're gonna start with the Supreme. We're watching a video with Joe Rogan first. And we're gonna call this segment Joe Rogan Regrets. But we're also gonna get into the SCOTUS situation here quite shortly. So, because the Supreme Court has done some interesting things as of late. So let's get into it, because like I said, there's just so much going on. So, there's a new clip out from Joe Rogan who's saying nothing seems stable. Everywhere in the world seems fucked right now. In all my years, this seems the most unstable globally. And yeah, and this person's kind of like, oh, how could that have happened? Well, we all know. So let's just listen to Rogan regret for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things, it's just nothing seems stable everywhere. Everywhere in the world seems fucked right now. Like this is in all of my years, this seems the most unstable globally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things.
I mean, it's, a lot of a lot of things have happened. I think guys like Joe Rogan, I mean, I don't even necessarily fault him for this stance. I think, like many Americans, he's deeply pragmatic. This isn't working, time for a change. Oh, that doesn't seem so good. Best pull back, sort of thing. Not understanding there are some lines you cross you can't come back from. And he, like me, has had a parade of people on the show, saying different things, asking open questions, all this type of thing. He obviously has a much larger platform than I do. Um, my weekly downloads, are his minute download. What I do in a week, he does in 10 minutes. But I just, it's kind of like the last like 6 months or so, he's like a lot of these guys have been a little, oh, I guess this wasn't such a good idea. And it's like, yeah, people said that, but you wanted to try it anyway. You wanted to go down this road anyway. You wanted to see what this could be anyway. And now you're kind of like, oh, everything seems unstable. Like, it seems like it's like, yeah, and some of this stuff would have happened regardless of who you voted for in 2024. But especially with someone of his size, you can't not deny his influence on all of this because of the platform that he has. But honestly, on the other half of that coin is congratulations, the median American voter. I mean, seriously, congratulations, the median American voter, because that's I think where a lot of people are at to be kind of like, oh, things are getting a little out of hand, and I think this is why like the standard like the clarion call, even as early as the midterms, and certainly by 2028, will be for people be kind of like, oh well, I hope the Democrats can come in and fix this stuff and all this all this type of thing. Um, and it was funny because someone said the other day, it's like, I really feel, I'm a social liberal and a fiscal conservative. And I said, yeah, congratulations, you're the American voter. Those things don't go together, by the way. You can't be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. It's not possible. If you want to be socially liberal, you have to be fiscally liberal too. And that's why I think people struggle with getting what they want out of politics, because they want things that don't go together. Like, they're looking for okay, everyone does what they want, and there's these social issues, but those social people never ask for any rights or any programs or flex their political power in any way. They certainly don't cost us any money. I don't want to, it's like trans people can exist, but I don't want to give them money, something like people want things that don't go together. And the socially liberal fiscal conservative one, which is literally the median American voter, is not possible. And it's not practical in any sort of representative democracy. When you let people at the table, those people are going to ask for things. They're going to be kind of like, okay, we're here now. We've come a long way. There's inequalities. There's injustice. We want to do something about that. People are kind of like, yeah, but only as it doesn't cost anything or cause us to actually do any change. And people who've been working in the civil rights movement and in racial inequality and things that have known this for decades. Malcolm X once famously, I'm sorry, it was MLK that said the most dangerous thing was well-meaning white liberal people. This is the same thing. And so when someone like Rogan comes along and is like, oh, nothing seems stable, everything seems weird, this is the most unstable, all this stuff, it's like, yeah. And people told you what would happen. I don't. It's hard to feel good about the Rogan regret when it's like, it's not like you weren't told. It's not like people didn't say things. And I get where he's coming from. Listen, I'm not the biggest fan of the Democratic Party or who they've been running for the last several cycles. When Biden was announced, I'm like, oh God, they're gonna make me vote for Joe Biden. Ugh. I only voted for Obama once. Like, sort of thing. It's like it's I get where he's coming from, but he also has, his daily listener count is 100 times my weekly listener count. And I feel like I would say, yeah, I'm sorry you feel that way, Joe, but, you've helped make this possible. You've helped make this happen. You got behind someone who made no secrets or bones about what he was going to do, and he has implemented almost all of it. Project 2025, 52% complete. All this, like that's, it's all out there. You had all the information and knowledge, but you caught a vibe, and I appreciate a good vibe, but you caught a vibe, and now we've led us into the shit. And the person who posted this I love their comment. White Americans have been worshiping Reagan and small government for the past 45 years, kissing the feet of sociopathic tech bros for the past 25, praying to the military for the past 250, and hating public services since black folks got access to them in 65. Miss me with the How Act. Like, yeah, I mean, it's, it is it is all part of the regret syndrome that is so here and so present. So I'm not going to spend much more time on that because we have a ton to get to. Um, so let's move on quickly to the next segment, which is SCOTUS update. SCOTUS update. Here we go. So I've been having this. I've had this story for a little bit. This is from what, March 3rd? Yeah, because we've been so busy. I just even haven't had time. Oh, this is Vox. I gotta go do the other thing. I need to go get this in Apple News. Hang on. We'll copy that. We'll go down here to Apple News where I have a membership for exactly this moment, and we will paste that in here. I actually have a couple articles in here about the Republican Party's issues with Hitler and all this type of thing, which we're not going to read tonight, but one of these days we'll go through my bookmarks and we'll go through some stuff. Anyway, so the Supreme Court Republicans just seized the most dangerous power in constitutional law. The court's latest ruling invokes a power that corrupts every court that wields it. The Supreme Court's Republican majority just did the legal equivalent of grabbing J.R.R. Tolkien's One Ring, placing it on their collective fingers, and dancing around singing, "I just can't wait to become a Nazgul." On Monday evening, the court handed down Mirabelli v. Bonta, with all 6 of the court's Republicans in the majority and all 3 Democrats in dissent. Republican Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito also signaled they thought it was too moderate. Mirabelli is one of the most consequential constitutional decisions the Roberts Court has ever handed down. The immediate impact of Mirabelli is that California public school teachers must out transgender students to their parents, even if the students wish to keep their gender identity secret from their family. While the court's decision in Mirabelli is short and does not fully explain itself, the Republican majority appears to object to a California state law which provides that public school employees, quote, shall not be required to disclose any information related to a pupil's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to any other person without the pupil's consent unless otherwise required by state or federal law, unquote. To reach this outcome, the Republican justices cite 2 provisions of the Constitution. The first is the First Amendment's language protecting the free exercise of religion. The Republican justices claim that teachers who respect their trans students' privacy interfere with the right of parents to guide the religious development of their children. The first part of the court's decision is likely to impose impossible obligations on public schools and their employees. Are teachers now required to tell parents anytime a student does something their parents might object to on religious grounds, such as eating non-kosher food, removing a hijab, or dating a classmate? But this first aspect of the court's decision in Mirabelli is the least consistent with the Republican justice's prior cases interpreting the Free Exercise Clause. Last June, in Mahmoud versus Taylor, the Republican justice ruled that public schools must inform parents in advance if they plan to teach books with LGBTQ characters or themes, and allow those parents to remove their child from those lessons. Since Justice Amy Coney Barrett's 2020 confirmation gave Republicans a supermajority, the court has been extraordinarily sympathetic to claims brought by the religious right. The second part of the court's Mirabelli decision is where the Republican justice grasped the One Ring, a legal doctrine called substantive due process, which judges can use to create constitutional rights not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. In the early 20th century, when economic conservatives were ascendant on the federal bench, the Supreme Court used substantive due process to invent a right to contract that the justices used to strike down workplace legislation, such as minimum wage laws and laws protecting the right to unionize. In the 60s and 70s, when cultural liberalism was ascendant among legal elites, the justice invented a right to privacy that encompassed various sexual freedoms, including the right to an abortion. Modern-day Republican justices, largely due to their revulsion against Roe v. Wade, were previously vocal critics of substantive due process. Indeed, in her Mirabelli dissent, Justice Elena Kagan quotes several of her own Republican colleagues railing against this legal doctrine. Thomas, for example, wrote in 2015 that substantive due process is a, quote, dangerous fiction, unquote, that allows judges to roam at large in the constitutional field, guided only by their personal views. Similarly, Justice Neil Gorsuch warned in a 2018 opinion that judicial misuse of the so-called substantive component of due process enables judges to dictate policy on matters that belong to the people to decide. For what it's worth, I agreed with Thomas and Gorsuch in the 2022 essay entitled The Uncomfortable Problem with Roe v. Wade, although I also argued that that in that piece that rights such as the right to an abortion, to marry a person of the same sex, which the court previously grounded in substantive due process, could instead be found within the Constitution's guarantee that no one be denied equal protection of the law. But the widespread anti-trans panic among Republicans appears to have inspired all 6 of the GOP-appointed justices to abandon their past critiques of substantive due process and proudly wear the One Ring. The practical upshot is that the court's Republicans may now use this most dangerous of legal doctrines to strike down literally any law or to otherwise impose their personal preferences on the nation. And then it goes into some other history and whatnot that we will not read right now because we're busy. Things are happening. And I also, besides that, there's another, I had another Supreme Court. Here it is. It was just one tab over. So that's Mirabelli, and schools will now be required to tell parents if they if their child is changing gender identity or anything like that, or even are gay or dating a class or whatever have you. It removes that California law and now makes a new legal rule. I imagine there will be further lawsuits at the lower level of parents suing school districts if they don't report, all this sort of thing. Speaking of SCOTUS news, though, the Supreme Court declined to hear a dispute over copyrights for AI-generated material. It says here, the U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to take up the issue of whether art generated by artificial intelligence can be copyrighted under U.S. law, turning away a case involving a computer scientist from Missouri who was denied a copyright for a piece of visual art made by his AI system. Plaintiff Stephen Thaler had appeared to the justice after lower courts upheld a U.S. Copyright Office decision that the AI-crafted visual art at issue was in the case was ineligible for copyright protection because it did not have a human creator. Thaler, of course, of St. Charles, Missouri, applied for a federal copyright registration in 2018 covering, quote, a recent entrance to paradise of visual art he said his AI technology, Dabus, created. The image shows train tracks entering a portal surrounded by what appears to be a green and purple plant imagery. The Copyright Office rejected his application in 2022, finding that creative works must have human authors to be eligible to receive a copyright. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration had urged the Supreme Court not to hear Thaler's appeal. The Copyright Office has separately rejected bids by artists for copyrights on images generated by the AI system Midjourney. Those artists argue that they were entitled to copyrights for images they created with AI assistance, unlike Thaler, who said his system created a recent entrance to paradise independently. A federal judge in Washington upheld the office's decision in the Thaler case in 2023, writing that human authorship is a bedrock requirement of copyright. The U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia Circuit affirmed the ruling in 2025. Thaler's lawyers told the Supreme Court in a filing that his case was of paramount importance, considering the rapid rise of generative AI. With a refusal by the court to hear the appeal, Thaler's lawyers said even if it later overturns the Copyright Office test in another case, it will be too late. The Copyright Office will have irreversibly and negatively impacted AI development and use in the creative industry during critically important years. Although the Copyright Act does not define the term author, multiple provisions of the Act make clear that the terms refer to human rather than a machine, the administration said. The Supreme Court previously rejected Thaler's request to hear his argument in a separate case involving prototypes for a beverage holder and a light beacon concerning whether AI-generated inventions should be eligible for U.S. patent protection. His patent applications were rejected by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office on similar grounds. So it appears that if you are making images using AI, you can't copyright them. Now, I wonder, as someone who also works in book publishing, where AI for covers and images and things like that is becoming industry standard, I wonder if that also applies. I think it does. I think it really says, if you are using AI to make stuff that can't be copyrighted, it can be used by someone else, in the same way, which, if you're in a business where you're creating, exclusive content for products using AI and you're concerned about the copyright protection, you're out of luck. So, before we move on, we're going to stop by have a psychology minute, and we're going to talk about the psychology of the far right. And I thought this was interesting from SciPost, where they say, quite fascinatingly, that a new study published in the Journal of Personality and Individual Differences suggests that a person's ability to handle uncertain situations plays a role in their political choices. The research provides evidence that people who struggle with ambiguity tend to favor rigid ideologies, which in turn increases their likelihood of supporting radical right political parties. These findings highlight how basic psychological responses to an increasingly complex world can shape broader political movements. Past research hints that broad personality traits influence voting behavior, but the exact pathway has remained somewhat unclear. To explore this dynamic, the researchers focus on a psychological concept called tolerance for ambiguity. Tolerance for ambiguity refers to how well a person can process complex, contradicting, or unfamiliar information without feeling threatened. People with a high tolerance for ambiguity generally accept that the world is messy and complicated. Those with a low tolerance for ambiguity tend to prefer black and white thinking, seeking out clear rules and simple answers. The scientists propose that this specific psychological trait acts as a bridge between foundational personality traits and political ideology. This study was inspired by both a theoretical gap and real world developments. While previous research suggested that personality traits are indirectly related to support for radical right parties, the psychological mechanism behind this link remained unclear, said study authors Almut Litz, a research associate at the German Center for Integration and Migration Research and a doctoral candidate at Goethe University in Frankfurt, and Sabrina Jasmine Mayer, a political sociology professor at the University of Bamberg. Quote, we aim to address this by proposing tolerance for ambiguity as a mediating factor. At the same time, the rise of the radical right parties, such as the Alternative for Germany, AfD, highlights the societal importance of understanding how people cope with uncertainty in complex social and political contexts. They base their work on the psychological entropy theory. This scientific theory suggests that human personality is deeply shaped by how individuals manage uncertainty and the anxiety it brings. According to this framework, an unpredictable world creates a sense of psychological disorder. People are motivated to reduce this disorder to feel secure. The researchers hypothesize that individuals who are less tolerant of ambiguity develop a strong need for certainty. This desire for clarity might make right-wing authoritarianism, anti-immigrant sentiments, and populist attitudes highly appealing to them. Right-wing authoritarianism is an ideological stance characterized by strict obedience to traditional authorities, aggressive feelings towards those who break social norms, and a strong preference for conventional morals. Populist attitudes involve a specific worldview that favors popular sovereignty and sees society as divided into two warring groups. I didn't need a study to tell you this. I'm so glad we have it, but I didn't need a study to say this. Yes, the reason why, and this is the same thing that happens, in college a lot. People are like, colleges are indoctrinating our kids. No, your kids finally met someone that was outside of the bubble of the people that you had them around, or your neighborhood, or your school. They're meeting people from different backgrounds, and their minds are young and flexible, and they're realizing the world is bigger and more complicated than what you set them up for, and they're now adding that into their thinking and their perspective. The military oftentimes has a similar effect because it's people from diverse locations, diverse backgrounds, with diverse opinions. A lot of people, and this gets even into like The Big Sort, which is an interview I did 10 years ago now, where this guy said, no, like we're literally physically, Democrats and Republicans, and this is before Trump, Democrats and Republicans are physically moving away from each other. Like, actually, we do not live in the same locations. And he said, yeah, and he's like, it can be as little as people driving around a neighborhood, and it's not even an overt thing. It can just be the vibes don't feel right, and they go to the next house where things feel right. And so people tend to live and create situations in which they're the most comfortable, people are the most similar, whatever have you, and they raise their kids in that environment. Then when the kids go out and discover a whole world outside of that bubble, which definitely was me because I grew up very sheltered, outside of that bubble, then all of a sudden their opinions and views change, and people are kind of like, oh my god, what's happened to my kids? Nothing. They saw the world. They learned about the world, they expanded their minds, and that's why, and again, if the non-college educated, are tending to vote more Republican now because it offers easy solutions to a complicated world. It really is that simple. It's easy solutions to a complicated world, and someone like Trump, it's in the language of Trump. Only I can fix it. Remember that? Psychological need for certainty. They say it out loud. We didn't need a study to know this, but I thought I would read it and mention it because it explains a great deal of why we get to where we get. But I also agree, I saw a clip from Mark Maron last night. He said progressives have got to do something. We have got to be like friendly, cool people again. We have spent the last decade becoming the biggest, loudest killjoys and just annoying everybody is no wonder they don't want to vote for us. That's a whole separate problem. But that psychological need for certainty is a big factor in this whole conversation. All right, let's move on. Oh, yes, the Doge situation. Okay, I actually want to read this one. Yes, I want to read this one first. So, let me change my graphic. So, there's a legal case against the Doge people right now, and there was a deposition. And the videos of the depositions have come out, and it's quite sad. So, let me go through this first. So, this person said Doge collapsed because it was built on the false assumption that waste is a bug in the political system which is meant to govern the country efficiently. Waste is actually the purpose of the political system, and governing the country efficiently is an unintentional bug that the system is busy fixing. Political systems just collect more and more and more parasites over time. Eventually, almost everyone is a parasite in some way, and the only people trying to use the system honestly are getting crushed under the weight of a billion parasites. Elon looked inside all the databases and systems and realized how bad things already were and gave up on fixing politics and is now fully focused on AI, which I think is the correct move. I am yeah. This is all wrong, but this is the attitude. If you want to understand why people cared about Doge, this is the attitude. It's all waste. I hear this now. It's waste. It's corrupt. We have so much all this type of thing. Social programs, because there's so much oversight, tend to be some of the most efficient programs. I said at the time, if Doge wants to find ways, they need to go to 2 locations: Medicare and Defense. Pentagon can't pass an audit. Haven't in a decade. There's $100 billion of Medicare fraud that we know of. Doesn't even count what we don't know that we know of. If you want to go find waste and inefficiencies, those are the places to go. Doge never went there because that wasn't Doge's point. Now, this comment here is very interesting because it says that contradicts Elon's own statements that have the Doge team. Elon said he had identified and cut billions in wasted spending, like national park surveys. Turns out he was just lying. There were no $150 million fake people getting SS in our $100 billion parks and surveys. Same pattern he's used in business. Some business leaders like Elon are parallels to politicians, seeking inefficiency and corruption for extraction. Waste could be cut by someone who actually wanted to care about cutting it. That was never Elon's real goal, and it never was. The whole point of Doge was to get rid of the programs the Republican Party has been trying to kill in Congress for decades. That's why none of us were surprised when they went after the NEA or PBS or anything like that, because some of us are alive in the 90s. Remember when Newt Gingrich was trying to get rid of that stuff? Some of us are alive for the Bush administration when they were trying to get rid of that stuff. They finally got their wish. That's the kind of the thing with like Project 2025 and Doge and all this type of thing is, in Trump, the Republican Party is getting a wish list they've had since at least 1994 and probably before that. And they are finally getting it all. They have stripped government out the way they've always wanted to. They have ended the silly programs the way they've always wanted to. Not a single thing they're doing is new. Not one. I'm surprised with the lack of legality and constitutionality of it, but I think that was the point. They could never find a constitutional or political way to get it done, so they found a way to do it illegally. And that was the actual point of Doge. Now, with all of that in mind, let's watch this clip. Just watch.
You don't regret that people might have lost important income to
No.
to support their lives?
No. I think it was more important to reduce the federal deficit from $2 trillion to close to zero.
Did you reduce the federal deficit?
No, we didn't.
This is a history of the HIV/AIDS prison movement and its legacies in the United States. My book project narrates how activists fought the convergence of HIV/AIDS and incarceration from inside and outside prisons across the Reagan through Clinton years, and argues that this organizing holds legacies in the prison abolition movement of the 1990s to today. This is one of the grants that you or Mr. Fox identified as craziest at NEH, is that right?
That's right.
Why did you identify this as one of the craziest grants?
Because it references feminist and queer insights into prison abolition and LGBTQ studies.
Any other reasons?
No.
Examining military service from the margins, the complicated service discussion series will bring together veterans and community members to examine the experiences of service members who identify themselves as female, Black, Native American, LGBTQ, or an immigrant, the dynamics, reasoning, and strength behind serving a country that does not always serve you in return. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
You and Mr. Fox identified this as one of the craziest grants at NEH?
Yes, it appears so.
Why did you do that?
Because it explicitly says LGBTQ.
Do you have any history in, like, let's say, scholarly peer review?
No.
Okay. So, but this judgment call was made by you and your personal judgment combined with Justin's personal judgment to cancel grants based on DEI.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's inappropriate in any way that someone in their 20s with no experience with grants or federal government was making personal judgment calls about what grants to cancel?
Objection. No, I don't think it's inappropriate.
Okay. Why not?
Objection. I think a person can have enough judgment from reading books and being well informed outside of traditional experience to make judgment calls about obvious things like a grant that literally lists DEI in its description to know whether it violates an executive order.
I'm sorry. I'm saying books because you said books. What books would you have read that would have informed your opinion on what grants to cancel based on DEI or not?
There were no books.
For your consideration. Like, just literally, for your consideration. This team of people gutted programs throughout the federal government, grants throughout the federal government. They have wrecked lives, they have wrecked careers, they have wrecked agencies, they have set research back, and that's just the low-hanging humanities stuff. We'll not get into NIH and the setbacks in Alzheimer's research, cancer research, all this type of thing. I mean, this was the attitude. And with AI, they were just looking through the titles. They didn't even read the grant, look at any of the metrics for why the grant was given out, what the grant procedures were. No. They didn't do any of that. Nothing. They looked at the title, they saw ideological stuff they didn't like, and it was cut. Now, I'm sure my audience will have multiple thoughts about that, and many of you will say, thank God they did it, that was a good thing. To which I would say, okay, fair enough. I don't agree, but I'll tell you why. There are lots of things in a society as large and diverse as ours that are worth funding and worth doing that may not necessarily apply to you. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing or isn't important to the communities involved. Remember earlier how I said you can't be socially liberal and fiscally conservative? Those two things don't actually go together, which is part of the reason why our politics are broken. People want a society that literally isn't possible. And this is an example of, if you put a lot of this stuff to the American people, a lot of people would say, oh, that's pointless, that's stupid, why on earth are we paying for this? Oh, my tax dollars at work, all this type of thing. And I would say, okay, yeah, for you, this doesn't matter, but for the communities who took the time to apply to the grant, meet the requirements, and put that together, it was everything. It's how culture gets preserved. It's how our society continues to continue. Believe it or not, unfortunately, this stuff matters. And you cannot replace all of this with private donation and charity. There's not enough of it. And you know how I know? Because we used to have that before World War II. Of all the things they did during the New Deal, which was not just the TVA and not just the Hoover Dam or the WPA projects or anything else, it was the art. The murals that got painted. Dorothea Lange got paid to go take photographs. There was wonderful art created, paid for by the federal government as a way to employ photographers, artists, mural painters, all this type of thing, so that not only were we developing our country, but we also made it beautiful. And so when we fund these things, our society becomes richer, deeper, and better over time. And the wonderful thing is we've gotten to live in the legacy of people who did great and wonderful and amazing things until people decided, and it became a polarized issue. Now, I laugh that, I was doing some pretty extraordinary things when I was 24 years old. By the time I was 24 years old, I already had a master's degree in international relations. I had already completed undergrad degree. I'd already worked in state government. I had already ran and left a magazine by that time. By the time I was 24, I was in the middle of running another magazine, and I had already produced a major theater show. On top of a career in music, a career in stand-up comedy, being a working gig musician, having been a freelancer, having worked in marketing. I had done a lot by the time I was 24 years old. But I guarantee you, no one should have put me in charge of making decisions about grants based upon words and titles and keywords. And I don't care where you are politically aligned on all of that. That was just simply a very dangerous idea. But that loops back to my original point. The point of Doge was never to save money. It was never to try to reduce the deficit, because they failed at it miserably. The point was to get rid of all the programs the Republican Party has been trying to get rid of for 30 years. And, in the blatant words of some people, it had a lot to do with reducing the power base of the Democratic Party. Cut off the money, cut off the funding, cut off the view, all this type of thing, and you degrade the power of the Democratic Party. It's infinite game. Infinite game. You keep doing, you keep probing, and now they're getting everything they ever wanted. Everything they ever wanted. Everything. Which gets us into Iran, which we're not going to talk about yet, but hang on with that. So, that's the downfall of Doge and all this sort of thing. These videos are around. All this sort of thing. It's and that, the videos are around if you want to go watch more of them. It's pretty galling to see, honestly. Like, your grant was eliminated by someone born in 2001. That's just depressing. Anyway. We'll let this one go. Yes, GitHub and AI. This is good. I can tell we're not going to get to all these stories tonight. Although I might have to get into Iran, because how could we not? Anyway, so apparently we have a little bit of a problem. It's an Ars Technica article. We'll bounce into that quickly. A supply chain attack using invisible code hits GitHub, excuse me, and other repositories. Researchers say they've discovered a supply chain attack flooding repositories with malicious packages that contain invisible code, a technique that's flummoxing traditional defenses designed to detect such threats. The researchers from firm Aikido Security said Friday they found 151 malicious packages that were uploaded to GitHub from March 3rd to March 9th. Such supply chain attacks have been common for nearly a decade. They usually work by uploading malicious packages with code and names that closely resemble those of widely used code libraries, with the objective of tricking developers into mistakenly incorporating the former into their software. In some cases, these malicious packages are downloaded thousands of times. The packages Aikido found this month have adopted a newer technique, selective use of code that isn't visible when loaded into virtually all editors, terminals, and code review interfaces. While most of the code appears in normal readable form, malicious functions and payloads, the usual telltale signs of malice, are rendered in Unicode characters that are invisible to the human eye. The tactic, which Aikido said it first spotted last year, makes manual code reviews and other traditional defenses nearly useless. Other repositories hit in these attacks include NPM and OpenVSX. The malicious packages are even harder to detect because of the high quality of their visible portions. The malicious injections don't arrive in obviously suspicious commits, Aikido's researchers wrote. The surrounding changes are realistic: documentation tweaks, version bumps, small reflectors, and bug fixes that are stylistically consistent with each target project. The researchers suspect that Glassworm, the name they assigned to the attack group, is using LLMs to generate these convincingly legitimate appearing packages. At the scale we're now seeing, manual crafting of 151 plus bespoke code changes across different code bases simply isn't feasible, they explained. Fellow security firm KOI, which has also been tracking the same group, said it too suspects the group is using AI. The invisible code is rendered with private use areas, sometimes called private use access, which are ranges in the Unicode specification for special characters reserved for private use in defining emojis, flags, and other symbols. Oh, good lord, that's too technical. Let's move on quickly. So, and here's a demonstration of it. So, yeah, that you can't see what is happening. It says the backtick string passed to SF looks empty in every viewer, but it's packed with invisible characters that, once decoded, produce a full malicious payload. In past incidents, that decoded payload fetched and executed a second stage script using Solana as a delivery channel capable of stealing tokens, credentials, and secrets. So I thought that was an interesting, speaking of wars and lines of attack, I thought it was an interesting thing to be going on in light of everything else that is happening. There's also not a really good way to defend against that, which I think is probably the worst part of all. And considering how, and this is the dirty secret of tech, everyone uses all these GitHub repositories and libraries all the time. And the reality is, once that well gets poisoned, a lot of stuff, I'm not even joking, a lot of stuff will stop working. Like, this stuff is more delicate than and fragile than we think, and people forget that. Oh yes. We'll Oh, Trump and his friends in the media. So, Trump is unhappy about the war coverage around Iran, and this weekend, he said in a Truth Social post that anyone who does not cover the war positively should face charges of treason. Says here, the 79-year-old president posted a nearly 400-word Truth Social rant on Sunday, slamming Iran for feeding, quote, the very appreciative fake news media in the U.S. and even resorting to AI to spread false information. The president claimed Iran had circulated images of phony kamikaze boats shooting at various ships at sea, and that while they looked wonderful, powerful, and vicious, he added that these boats don't exist. Repeating his claim that the U.S. had defeated Iran's military and slamming the Wall Street Journal for false reporting, Trump took his anger to new heights. The Journal on Sunday covered an Iranian attack on a Saudi airbase in which it said 5 U.S. military refueling planes were hit and damaged. Trump suggested that the Journal's story was false and that Iran was spreading fake news through AI. He said 4 of the aircraft were still in service, with the exception of one, which will soon be flying the skies. The Daily Beast contacted the Wall Street Journal for comment. He then blasted Iran, which, quote, working in close coordination with the fake news media, spread a fake image of USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, quote, burning uncontrollably in the ocean. Trump said that it was not burning and also had not been shot at. The video was fact-checked last week by AFP, which concluded it was made using AI. Trump went on, the story was knowingly fake, and in a certain way you can say that those media outlets that generated it should be brought up on charges of treason for dissemination of false information. Treason is considered one of the most severe crimes in U.S. federal law. Anyone owing allegiance to America who goes to war against them or aids or comforts their enemies can be subject to the death penalty or imprisoned for a minimum of 5 years. In a gaggle on Air Force One on Sunday, Trump lashed reporters over coverage of his war, while also saying he was not ready to declare an end to the conflict. And then he went on, it goes on to the coverage and all this sort of thing. So, the president also took swings at a reporter from ABC, calling them one of the most corrupt news organizations on the planet, before refusing to take any more questions from the outlet. When a female reporter asked Trump why the U.S. is sending 5,000 Marines and sailors, the president shot back, "You're a very obnoxious person," he said, and took a different question from a male reporter. Trump has forum for being rude to female journalists, last year snapping quiet picky at one journalist. As part of his rambling Truth Social rant about the media, Trump also praised his FCC henchman Brendan Carr, who has already been threatening to revoke broadcasting licenses of networks he feels are not covering the Iran war in a way that, quote, meets public interest, unquote. Which, if you were subscribed to my newsletter, you would have read about on Saturday. And so it goes into the Brendan Carr tweet. And the president also replied and said they get billions of dollars of free American airwaves and use it to perpetuate lies, both in news and almost all of their shows, including the late night morons, who get gigantic salaries for horrible ratings and never get, as I used to say in The Apprentice, fired, the president wrote. Trump, I always laugh because Trump loves the media so much, and they have enabled him on every level, and it's never enough. The coverage is never nice enough. It's never fawning enough. They never talk about him enough. His desire for attention knows no end. And it's funny when he goes and openly attacks them. But the thing to remember about Trump is he enjoys conflict, back and forth, someone pressing up against someone else. He does not want people working in the same direction with the same goal. He wants that push, and he does the same thing. So when the media's like, says, they're saying this, I'll push back. It has nothing to do with the truth or what's right or whatever have you. It has entirely to do with the conflict. That's what Trump values. And it's a matter of who's going to push back the most, who can do the most, all this everything. That's what Trump wants, because Trump ultimately only respects the strong, which does not include him. Yes, let's talk Israel. So, this whole situation in Israel is getting very interesting, and I will tell you why. So, let's start here, actually, before we talk about collapsing public opinion. So I loved this piece because, one, it includes a great piece from the Newsweek, which we're not going to read, but the links are here. But the thing I love is that it actually is a post that actually has some sources, like what I do. So, it says here, I've seen several claims over the past 2 weeks that the United States needs Israel because it provides the U.S. with critically needed intelligence. That is incorrect. It also ignores Israeli espionage inside the United States. A brief overview of both. First, the intelligence Israel provides Washington pertains to actors in conflicts only relevant to the United States because of the special relationship. The intelligence provided is on Israel's adversaries. If Israel perceives them as threatening, it behooves Israel to provide the United States with this intelligence. They do not need American political, economic, or security incentives to do so. Moreover, this intelligence is often alarmist and politically motivated to push the United States towards confronting Israel's enemies. Washington maintains a global intelligence apparatus more than capable of surveilling America's adversaries, not Israel. Second, and this is the important part, there is a long history of Israeli espionage, both inside the United States and targeting Americans abroad. The U.S. intelligence community has highlighted this threat for decades. A leaked CIA document from 1979 discussing Israel's foreign intelligence operations noted the United States is at the top of the Israeli intelligence priorities, while U.S. intel officials testifying to Congress in 2014 described Israel's espionage activities in the U.S. as unrivaled. Israel and the lobby also go to great lengths to work around the Foreign Agents Registration Act in their attempt to influence Washington. So long as Israel feels like it can continue such behavior without repercussions, why would it ever stop? And then it gets into some really great histories, including an article by Charles Babcock from 1986 about Israeli intelligence, one from 2014, 2 articles from Jeff Stein from 2014, an article from with Glenn Greenwald, of all people, from 2015, Glenn Kessler from 2020, and a really great article from The Guardian from 2024. Now, bearing in mind that we are very helpful to Israel much less so to us, and they love to spy on us, let's then talk about public opinion. There's been a new shift, according to a new poll from NBC News. And it says here, in the Middle East situation, are your sympathies more with the Israelis or with the Palestinians? In 2013, it was 45%. In 2026, it's 40%. Palestinians are up from 13 to 39%. Democrats, Palestinians at 67% up from 18%. Independents is up 37% from 10% just 13 years ago. And Republicans, it has gone up less crazy. But for Republicans, it's gone from 8% in 2013 to 13%. In terms of public opinion, Israel is, there's no better way to put it, bleeding Democrats and independents. And overall, they're barely hanging on to a majority they once commanded, which is their overall number. Obviously, Democrat positions have shifted, independents have shifted away, and it's not even close. And then overall, they are clinging to the pool on a lead. Over here we have views of Israel shifted negative, especially among Democrats and independents. So positive views overall are somewhat split. Positive 32, neutral, don't know, not sure 30, negative 39. So your negative is up. Sure. Back in 2023, that was much less stark. Negative was only 24, neutral 30, positive 47. That's a pretty nasty fall in 3 years. For people who identify as Democrats, it's a complete collapse of views on Israel. You're up to 57% negative, 30% neutral, 13% positive. Independents, a similar collapse. 22% negative back in 2023, 46% here. Republicans are the only place you're still doing well. Now, bear that in mind in what influence Israel may or may not have in elections. If Israel knows if a Democrat gets back in, they're screwed, what lengths do you think they will go to make sure Republicans stay in power? I'm not saying anything. It's all conjecture, just food for thought. However, I also wanted to highlight things are not going so well even inside Israel. And there's been some videos of protests. There was an attack at a government building. Netanyahu has not been seen for weeks. That's been on social media today. I'm sure you've heard about it. And also the crazy AI video that Israel released that Iran responded to. This message from Rabbi David Mivaser is interesting, and this is translated from Hebrew, and I've been wanting to read it for a couple weeks, and so we're coming up to the top of the hour, and we haven't even got to Iran yet, but we'll read some of it. Let me clear some tabs here. It hurts me so much to admit this as an Israeli, a Jew, and a Zionist, but recent times have made me understand more and more how the Holocaust happened. There is racism in the state of Israel, and a lot of it. It has been radicalized in recent times, both in light of brutal Muslim terrorism and in light of a racist and fascist government and a media that normalizes it. But there is racism and there is racism, and there is one part of society, call them the Messianics, the extremist settlers, the Hill Boys, who are not fundamentally different from the Nazis. They are joined by a small part of the racists who do not necessarily belong to this group, but who are violent, cruel, and find their place among the Messianics. The state of Israel does not have a directive to murder Arabs, but there are elements in the government who, at the very least, wink at indiscriminate murder, violent expulsion, and extermination. The truth is, it's not just a wink. It's in the budgets and infrastructure for farms in Judea and Samaria. It's in the threat to law enforcement agencies who dare to investigate war criminals. It's in a member of the Knesset who visits the prison of a terrorist who murdered a baby and calls him a righteous man. It's in the head of her party who admires a mass murderer, and its two entire parties in the coalition that represent this moral abomination, along with a not small part of the ruling party. So even without an official policy and order, it's clear today that there are large parts of the government that support atrocities. And when the murderers, pogromists, and rapists go unpunished and even receive public support from elected officials, that is indeed a de facto policy. And most of the people are silent. The news hardly talks about it. If it does, the report is distorted. 2 Palestinians killed in clashes with settlers. Confrontation 2 meters outside the house of Palestinians who went out into the yard and got shot in the head by Judeo-Nazis. And if you talk about it with liberal friends, they don't believe it, or they continue with this lie of weeds that you don't know what really happened there. And when would they pay attention? There was a real war in Gaza, so it's easy for people to tell themselves that there were no war crimes and that everything was in the framework of the fighting. In fact, there were crimes committed by a minority of soldiers, but the perpetrators, including murderers, were not punished. And in Judea and Samaria, what's the excuse? Settlers come to villages and shoot people in the head and no one cares. And if there were 100 murderers a week, would anyone care? 1,000? 10,000? Would the majority ever put an end to it? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. It simply doesn't interest the majority of the public here, and it makes me to think there's no scope of atrocities that would interest the majority. The average Nazi was a person who ignored atrocities, not who committed them. The execution was of the preserve of a few, and we are not there, but we are on a steep and dangerous slope. In the end, a child who takes a bullet to the head in Gaza, or an old man whose legs are broken by violent settlers in the southern Hebron Hills, doesn't care that it is on a much smaller scale than the Holocaust, and we shouldn't care either. We should oppose such behavior with all our might and denounce the Judeo-Nazis within us, and we simply don't do that. And a final comment in conclusion about the contempt for the Holocaust. Comparisons are forbidden. I don't even know what that word is. That's probably a very kind of local word. Magaletus will cry out, and the truth is the opposite. Comparisons are necessary, and the lessons of the past are necessary, and processes must be identified at stages when disasters can still be prevented. Nothing devalues the memory of the Holocaust more than indifference to the murder of innocents. Nothing humiliates the victims of the Holocaust more than their descendants, who are not interested in their own people murdering others on the basis of racial ideology. The state of Israel must be reformed, and reform must begin with acknowledging reality. Reality, unfortunately, is harsh. I've been saying this since college. I've been calling Israel an apartheid state for years, and I'm glad other people, even Zionist Jews, are, saying it, reposting it. This was originally written by Michael Maher. It was reposted by Rabbi David Misvasier. And I'm glad people are finally saying it. I'm glad it's finally coming out, and people are finally realizing what the problem is. And now that apartheid state has caused a war that may cause global starvation because we can't get fertilizer through the Strait of Hormuz and the ingredients for it, who may have caused us the worst crisis since the oil embargo. And they're not done. They're not done. Haunting times. It's 8:02. There is some movement around China and Taiwan. There's 26 warplanes and 7 warships positioned around the island. And a lot of people on Twitter have their hair on fire and thinking that China is going to take Taiwan, and that will then, end modern technology, because most of the world's chips are made in Taiwan at TSMC. And that if there's a blockade, Taiwan has limited energy supplies, because guess who they import oil from? So there's a lot of hair on fire today about all of this. But as this person accurately points out, 26 planes and 7 ships is the usual China pressure campaign, not some surprise apocalypse. And your 11 days line is bullshit too, because Taiwan says it has over 100 days of oil and 11 days of gas, not 11 days left to live. So you're going to see a lot of hair on fire about China-Taiwan. It's the ordinary type of thing, be careful with social media. We don't hear much about the Epstein files lately now, do we? Well, there's a reason for that. Massive Jeffrey Epstein bombshell drops as the pedophile's personal accountant reveals that Epstein's estate paid off one of Donald Trump's accusers. It says here, Richard Kahn, who served as Epstein's accountant, testified before the House Oversight Committee earlier today. And by today, we mean, when was this dated? Last week. He worked with the billionaire predator for over a decade, offering him unique insight into his shady operations and business practices. Well, more details will be released at a later date. Congressman Suhas Subramaniam took to X to share his notes from the deposition. He revealed that Kahn mentioned 5, quote, rich and powerful parties who bankrolled Epstein's operations: Les Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Steven Snosky, and the Rothschilds, and Leon Black. Kahn also, and we actually know that because that guy did that financial analysis and tracked some of that. Kahn also mentioned former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak as having close financial ties to the pedophile. A Trump accuser received money from the Survivor Fund managed by Kahn, wrote Subramaniam. Guys like Kahn enable billionaires like Epstein to get away with crimes that the other 99% of Americans couldn't, he added. If Trump is innocent like he insists, why would his best friend Epstein be paying out money to his accuser? The answer is obvious. Trump is a serial sexual predator and a pedophile. We still don't necessarily know that. It could not necessarily have been for Trump. Not that I'm defending him, but that's not proof. The congressman goes on, quote, Another person who was an accuser of Donald Trump, who was given a settlement by Jeffrey Epstein's estate, we did confirm that, he said. When asked for more details, he demurred and said that it would be best to wait for the release of the transcript. Quote, "We wanted to confirm that certain accusers had received settlements, and he confirmed that," he explained. "We already know that Trump's name was all over the Epstein files, and he has been accused of heinous sexual abuse and rape. In one particular case, he was accused by a woman of sexually abusing her when she was only 13 years old. Her allegation was so credible that the FBI interviewed her 4 times. Pam Bondi's Justice Department tried to bury the interviews, but they were eventually uncovered. Enough is enough. An exhaustive investigation must be launched immediately, and this accountant must be forced to reveal everything that he knows." That would be him in the middle. As the old adage goes, if you want to know the story, follow the money. That's an interesting indication of what could be, but it doesn't prove anything yet, and people forget that. The situation in Cuba has become untenable for all parties involved, especially in Cuba. So ever since we took over Venezuela, we have banned Cuba. We've embargoed Cuba from importing oil. They were getting all their oil from Venezuela. We have stopped those shipments. And now, after weeks of rationing and trying to survive it, the national power grid has collapsed.
And breaking news into CNN, Cuba's electrical grid has suffered a complete and total collapse. This is according to the country's power operator. It's the first nationwide blackout since the U.S. effectively shut off the flow of oil to Cuba.
So that, if the Trump administration was trying to use the oil embargo to get the Cuban regime to fall apart, I don't know that they're going to be successful about that. But this is certainly part of it. I did see footage over the weekend. There were people were protesting and attacking Communist Party offices. It appears that Trump is trying to go for regime change in multiple places. With Cuba, it's oil. With Iran, it's bombs. I guarantee the first person who will take advantage of regime change in Cuba is Marco Rubio. He's Cuban. And it will be interesting how that develops, how many people in hospitals may die, how many people will go without food in a society that already has a lot of shortages. I know that for weeks now, hospitals have been using emergency generators. There have been rolling brownouts, blackouts. It appears they've finally run out of everything. And it's over. And I wonder what Cuba will do in response. My guess is there's a lot of negotiations happening behind the scenes, and this is leverage. I regret that so many people have become involved. The regular Cuban person has become involved in a greater gambit, and the U.S. trying to tie up old loose ends. It's hard, I think, tying back to the start of the show, and I was talking about Joe Rogan. I think it's hard to deal with the emotional gravity of everything happening right now. Even just what we've talked about in the course of this news hour. And I haven't even gotten to Iran yet. That's next. It's a lot to take on emotionally. The last non-Iran story I have going is about Pokemon Go to the polls. Pokemon! Pokemon Go is, so, all the privacy people that said, oh, this isn't good for privacy, they're tracking all your location data. Well, yep, as we now know, Pokemon Go data was used to build a 3D map of the world by contributing 30 billion crowdsourced images. And Bilal Sidhu interviewed Niantic, who was the creator of Pokemon Go, their CTO Brian McClendon, last year. And he said that Pokestop data isn't what you think it is. It's not a surveillance panopticon of your neighborhood. Those are these are static pictures of parks, statues, murals, landmarks, the places people congregate. Brian described it as building the map from the bottom up, from the locations where people spend time. Think of these 20 million waypoints as basically the inverse of what Google mapped with Street View. Google mapped the drivable streets. Niantic mapped where people actually hang out. Cool data, genuinely useful for visual positioning, but very different from what the headlines imply. It says that at the person level, they're capturing different data at different levels. At the person level, Axon body cams on hundreds of thousands of officers. Meta Ray-Ban glasses capturing first-person POV at scale. Overseas operators reviewing images every time someone says, "Hey, Meta." At the vehicle level, Tesla dash cams on every car in the fleet, massive onboard compute extracting and distilling data in the cloud. Flock Safety deploying CCTV across neighborhoods and cities, Amazon with Ring cameras on every doorstep, and Mailroom recently got dragged over that at the Super Bowl commercial about fusing all these cams together to find your dog, plus dash cams on every Prime delivery van. At the headset level, Apple Vision Pro and Meta Quest build a 3D model of whatever room you're in every time you put them on. At the platform level, Google and Street View cars, aerial planes, satellite imagery, and live location for every Android phone in your pocket. Apple doing the same with mapping cars, and every LiDAR iPhone is quietly a 3D scanner. And yeah, despite the Apple's too privacy-conscious narrative, they're collecting location data too. Fused together, we have everything from body cam to dash cam to doorbell to phone to satellite. Every layer of physical reality is being mapped by somebody right now. Different sensors, different angles, different purposes, same pattern. The interesting part is how they incentivize it. Google spends billions, Mapillary tried altruism, Hive Mapper grinds with crypto, Pokemon Go cracked something none of them could. A game mechanic that subsidizes the scanning behavior. You're not building a map, you're catching Pokemon. The map is just a side effect. 3D scanning is still a niche hobby for reality capture nerds like the person writing this. The moment somebody gamifies dense 3D capture at scale, not post photos but actual geometry, that's when this blows wide open. Niantic sold the games for $3.5 billion but kept the spatial platform with a data sharing agreement in place. One team makes the game great, the other builds the spatial infrastructure underneath. Incentives finally aligned. And that is it was reminding me of back in the early 2010s. There were these apps like Foursquare. Facebook had a version of it where every time you go out to see your friends or someone's house, whatever have you, you drop a check-in. Oh, hey, I'm here. Oh, hey, I'm there. As it turns out, I never actually wrote about this, but I was playing an article about, like, everyone's kind of forgotten about Foursquare. I was doing local business marketing at the time. It was absolutely essential for social sharing and growing your business. So doing it when I worked at the magazine, worked in nightlife, everywhere we went, we'd drop on Foursquare, drop our location, all this type of thing, to get people to show up and be aware of what we were doing. And as it turns out, all of that data is being used to basically construct these 3D AI-powered models of the world, of businesses, buildings, their layouts, all this type of thing. That's also part of this. All of this data that's been collected over the past 15 years is now being aggregated into one giant digital construct of the world. Who controls that is going to be the most powerful person or organization in the world. Mark it. March 16th, 2026. Whoever controls this massive amount of digital data is going to be the most powerful person or organization in the world. The slope has slipped. We don't have privacy anymore. There is not anywhere you can go on this planet that has not been mapped, cataloged, marked, and so on by something, somewhere. It's the Hollywood dystopia that we've been told about for years and years is about to be here. And there's no resistance. And almost no one knows. And now we finally get to Iran. We have a very long show tonight. Which is good because my back is starting to kill me. I've been recording this is like my third show today, so. loving this video from Bill Kristol. I might cut down some of our Iran coverage because my back is about done. But this video from Bill Kristol is, well,
I must say I find it a little bit, it's kind of a syllogism when people talk about what a great ally Israel is. It is a great ally in defense of Israel. You know, I mean,
which is fine. I mean, they're entitled to put that first. You know, right?
No, right. That's their great concern. And look, I mean, let's face it. At the end of the day, Iran is a much greater threat to Israel than it is to the United States. So when they say that when people say that Israel's a great ally in the fight against Iran, it's kind of like saying that South Vietnam was a great ally in the fight against North Vietnam. You know, I mean, it was, but weren't we there to defend South Vietnam? You know, so I must say I find it a little bit.
Yeah, the caption is the Iran war is so bad that PNAC co-founder Robert Kagan describes Israel as a strategic liability leading the U.S. into a quagmire. It's kind of like saying South Vietnam is a great ally in the fight against North Vietnam. Yeah, this is one of the first things I saw this morning, and I was kind of like, wow, the tide is already turning. This video I thought also was interesting. The Iranian foreign minister is on Ari Velshi on MS Now, talking about the bombs, the nuclear weapons, and how this war could end. And that Iran is ready to give up their nuclear material, dilute it, downblend it, and that this is a big concession. Now, I love open source intel, and I read a lot of open source intel, and I do love this account, and they seem to think that it's, you know, that this is a big concession. I don't necessarily know that it is, but we'll hear what he has to say.
I never said that we are going to make bombs. I said that we have 440 kilos of 60% enriched material, and that was not a secret. That is what is mentioned in the reports of the IAEA. So I said that, look, this is mentioned in the report. This, if enriched more, can be good enough for 10 bombs, as your own experts claims. So we are ready to give them away. We are ready to dilute them, to downblend them into lower degrees. And by saying that, I wanted to say that the concession that we are making is really big. But how they have interpreted that, I don't know. Maybe because the lack of enough knowledge, maybe because of their intentions to justify, as I said, the act of aggression.
Sounds like they were having some connection issues, probably due to the bombing. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting aspect of the Iran situation. He's on American television saying, oh, we're willing to give up our nuclear material. I mean, for those that think Iran is losing, this isn't a great sign. Like, this isn't, the talk of a nation who's ready to hunker down and beat the great imperialist power. It seems like Iran might be looking for an exit ramp. But that's based on this source of data. We've got a few more tabs. Let's keep going. According to Axios, Iranians will keep the Strait of Hormuz closed until they get a permanent peace deal, even if Trump tacos gives up. Privately, U.S. and Middle Eastern officials believe the crisis could continue for the next 6 months. And it says that the administration and allied countries who believe the instability in the Middle East and U.S. involvement could continue until September, even if the war shifts to a low-intensity conflict. Israel told journalists it plans at least 3 more weeks of attacks on thousands of additional targets in Iran. So that was in Axios this morning. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz does appear to be open to any ship that is not for Israel or its allies. A Chinese ship is supposed to have passed through the Strait of Hormuz today. I think I have that. Did I? No, I didn't save that one. It's yeah, but there was already like a Chinese ship that passed the Strait of Hormuz. So the Iranians are basically letting through ships of other countries that are not U.S. or its allies. How long before a Gulf state dumps the U.S. to get their product out. You know, how long these Gultists going to hang on? My guess is not long. This video was this U.S. senator saying that Netanyahu waited 40 years to find an American president, quote, stupid enough and reckless enough to start a war with Iran, and expose the shifting lies and tragic murder of Iranian schoolgirls, which was the response of the United States, and we're not going to watch that whole thing. This is the analysis around the fertilizer situation. And so the short version of this is that, and this is the important part, the number that should haunt every policymaker on Earth, the yield response to nitrogen is not linear, it's quadratic. In wealthy countries that overapply fertilizer, a 15% reduction costs maybe 3% of yield. In the global south, where farmers already apply 1/7 the global average, the same reduction pushes crops off a biophysical cliff where production does not decline, it collapses. Sri Lanka proved this in 2021. One season without synthetic fertilizer. Rice output collapsed 40%, government fell. Now multiply Sri Lanka across 30 countries simultaneously. There's already plant slowdowns and shutdowns due to lack of fuel, lack of oil. There's the amount of ingredients and fertilizers coming out of the Gulf into the Strait of Hormuz has already got most of Asia in a panic, and this is happening right as crops are going in the ground. Even in the U.S., prices could spike, costing farmers, again, millions of dollars. In fact, there's actually a bit in here about the Corn Belt. Where does it say? Might have not been in here. I've read so much stuff today that sometimes I'm like, some stuff I did save, some stuff I didn't save to just try to make this an efficient process. But farmers are already potentially not planting. Here it is. While corn farmers are abandoning nitrogen-intensive planting because they cannot afford $900 per ton ammonia against $4.50 corn, while the Fed is trapped at 3% core PCE interest rates with no room to cut and food inflation about to surge through every grocery aisle in America 6 months from now. Nobody's talking about this. Which, if you go with the thing from before that says this is going to go on until September, we could have expensive food well into the next couple years. And shortages. It'll be the pandemic, but worse. And it will be global. That's not all. It gets worse. According to, I heard this over the weekend, and New York Times on Sunday said Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is urging Trump to keep striking Iran. They are moving their oil production by a pipeline to the Red Sea. The New York Times also notes that Trump has been speaking with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu every day and has been on the phone with MBS as much. This was The Economist confirming that Iran strikes were incredibly accurate before the satellite images were taken down and kept secret. That the Iran knew exactly what they were doing, and how much damage they caused, including damage with THAAD radar facilities in Jordan, in Qatar, in the UAE, and that there was, Iran strikes have been effective. It says Iran didn't fire randomly. Iran fired surgically, targeting the eyes, ears, and arteries of the entire American military architecture in the region. And the moment that became undeniable from space, the satellites went dark. Trump said Iran is 100% destroyed. The 14-day blackout says they're not done yet. The images that embarrass an empire disappear. The missiles keep flying. And that was started in The Economist over the weekend. Last story, and this is how the war is spreading. Iran mass texting phones in Israel. The British Royal Navy is sending a ship. There are 40 million barrels of sanctioned crude sitting on the tankers off China's coast. And China's stockpiling while the world burns. Putin is calling for de-escalation, but while continuing to help Iran. Tucker Carlson said, if you wake up and you're living in a country that thinks it's okay to kill children and their mothers, something has gone terribly wrong. Ted Cruz responded by calling Tucker the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. There now appears to be regime changes, apparently kind of sort of off the table. And this was from this morning about the Iran war has reached a new level. Some of these things are helpful. Some of them things are a little bit sensational. There's a lot happening, and that there's obviously things are not done yet. Obviously, this conflict is not done yet, and we know that, and that's okay. But the unfortunate reality is that there's a lot going on in all of this, and there shows no end in sight, and there seems to be increasing resolve in both Toronto and Washington, D.C., which ironically is what I also said last week. So, all right, everyone, my back is killing me. I've been recording all day. I'm super hungry. Time to go. I'm having some lovely potato soup this evening. I love a cozy potato soup. It's pouring rain here. We have a terrible storm on the East Coast today. It's pouring rain here. So I'm going to go have a cozy soup with a little bit of ham, some cheese on top. Will be delicious. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. You can follow me online, sign up for everything at CameronJournal.substack.com, or head over to CameronJournal.com for the latest. I'm doing a series right now about Relief, a wonderful new company who is doing point-of-intent crypto to verify humanity in the age of AI. And those articles will be coming out. There's some social posts coming out this week, so make sure to follow me everywhere, CameronJournal.com, for links. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. Have a great night. Oh, I'll be here Wednesday with the Living Joke and the guys. So we'll be here Wednesday for that, and the news will be back next Monday. The interviews this week is Juliette Rose. We talked about writing and her fiction writing and everything. And then tomorrow, actually, we will be have an interview with Steve Keen, the economist, about how economics is broken. So make sure to tune in for that this week. All right, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.